Your Retirement Playbook, ideas and instructions. You know, there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat, or so they tell me. I've never tried. But when it comes to retirement, or what we call your life after work, there are many different ways to get it done, but there are some basic instructions, some just concepts that we believe you ought to follow. We're going to talk about that on Your Retirement Playbook today. When you come in and you see a fiduciary financial advisor, they're going to ask for some things, and it may seem sometimes overwhelming and quite frankly, unnecessary. I've had people in my years come in and say, Joe, I just don't show my tax return to anyone. Well, I get that. I understand that. The problem is I can't do my job without it. And I'm going to tell you a story you may or may not be aware of. It depends on your demographic. I'm 55. If you're near my age, you probably know of a guy or a gentleman by the name of David Lee Roth. And he was a musician that was very, very famous per the media. Not only was Van Halen very famous and great in the 80s, it was in 1985, it was the last song we played at our prom, and everything else I believe was called Jump. But the point is that David Lee Roth created a contract for people when they set up a concert for him, a stage for him, if you will. He had this very, very thick manual, a contract. And inside of that manual, buried in the middle of it, there was a rule that said in the green room, there can be no brown M&Ms. Now, the media got a hold of this and said that this was just a spoiled rich kid, arrogant, who would think about doing that, blah, 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 blah. He'd even put in the contract, if failure to perform any of these tasks results in me still getting paid and not having to do the contract. Now, at first glance, you may look at that and go, this was overkill, ridiculous, a brown M&M for goodness sakes. Well, here's the deal. In that year, they performed over 150 concerts. And unlike most shows, they had 6 semis of trucks and lights and everything else. He'd already seen peers, people that are in the music industry that year, catch on fire. Michael Jackson, I believe, was one of them. Right? And he knew if something wasn't wired correctly that he was putting his band, himself, and everybody else in jeopardy. And so they had very, very detailed figures about how electric boxes needed to be wired and things that need to be thought about. Not options, instructions. This is the way this is the amount of amperage. This is the amount of voltage. This is the amount of stuff that I need to be able to plug in. It was very well thought out. Now, at first glance, it's like, that's not necessary. That's not needed. This guy's a jerk, right? And it's really easy to get that until you get the rest of the information, the rest of the decision behind the story. And what David Lee Roth knew was if you didn't take out the brown M&Ms, which took no time at all, you certainly weren't going to wire the third jack box for plugging in to the right amperage that they needed for a certain guitar and a certain amp that they wanted in that spot. It really made all the sense in the world, but out of context, it didn't sound right. So when you call a financial advisor who's truly a fiduciary and they ask for things, there's reasons to get them. And keep in mind, I believe we all have a fiduciary. Just most of the time, it's the man in the mirror. Right? Most of the time, you're either doing this on your own, you've got your own 401k, you've got a broker who gets paid commissions, or you're working with somebody at a wirehouse who may charge you a fee, but it's somebody else that's managing the money. They're acting as a registered investment advisor licensee as opposed to actually managing the money internally and understanding what's going on. I believe most people have that fiduciary in the mirror. It's you, yourself, and you. Right? And when you're looking at it as a fiduciary, my job, if I were taking care of you, was to treat your money as if it were mine and we were in the same situation. In order for me to make decisions, I need certain ideas, certain things that have to be real and legitimate and concrete to be able to make the best decision for you. Part of that is your tax return. If you are dealing with somebody, and ladies and gentlemen, this includes you, if you're doing this on your own, if you're making financial decisions and you're not looking through the lens of your own tax return, you ought to consider either hiring somebody to help you and firing yourself, or at least creating a collaborative effort with somebody who understands how to do tax planning along with retirement planning. Remember, I didn't say tax reporting. I'm not talking about your CPA who does it when they do the taxes. This is something you got to do before year end. And we've got a lot of great CPAs we work with that work with us at the Financial Enhancement Group that do tax planning. But most of them don't have it in their system. They do tax reporting. The year has come to an end, and then they put the data in. What we want to do is create the story, give them the data that goes in so that when they do the tax reporting, they get it correct, whether that's Huth Thompson and Lafayette or E-Step Doctor and Company and Anderson and Muncie. Regardless of where that is, we want to make sure that it is thought out. So tax returns. What is your Social Security statement? Now, you may already say, well, Joe, I've already made the decision when I'm taking Social Security. Well, great. Congratulations. I'm glad you've moved something off the table. But if you're going to work with a fiduciary, we want to look at your entire operation to be able to see what you have financially, because our real interest is not in any individual stock. It's not in any individual savings plan. It's not in any individual thing at all. It's you and your family and your financial journey and getting you from A to Z, understanding all of the steps that are going to occur along the way, right? So it may seem and it may not make sense to you that brown M&Ms needed to be removed from the bowl, but it made sure that people were able to focus on and commit to a process of success, both for the venue and for David Lee Roth and Van Halen, and making sure that everybody was safe. When we ask for stuff, we need it to be able to make the most appropriate decision possible for you to say, hey, if I were you and it was my money and I were in a similar situation, this is what I would do. And that's exactly what we provide for people in a next steps meeting at the Financial Enhancement Group, for people just like yourself, just like you. We sit down, we have that conversation, but we have to have the right data. So what are some instructions and some ideas for your retirement playbook? The first one, and this is a toughie for me, the first one is you really have to figure out your retirement budget. And I've done a lot of videos and a lot of radio shows on this over the years, but now that I'm 55, in theory, that period of time is getting closer. Now, I have no intentions of retiring, or I wouldn't be standing here doing this radio show or podcast, depending on how you're getting it. I love what I do. I love teaching this financial stuff, and I'll do it as long as God allows me. But I still have to recognize I'm closer to the end than I am the beginning, right? There's just no way around that. 35 years have passed, and I've got younger people that I'm training and bringing into the industry all of the time. And by the way, if you know somebody who wants to be in this industry, who's already in the industry, you can have them give us a call at 800-928-4001. I'm always open-minded enough to at least listen to why somebody belongs on our team if they want to be in the financial services industry. So when you're looking at that data, that first thing that you have to really start with is how much income, not assets, how much income do you need to maintain your standard of living when you go to separate from the workforce? Notice I didn't say retire. I call it your life after work. But it's when you leave that primary occupation, how much money do you really need to have? How much income do you need to have to maintain your standard of living? And we really watch people do three different things. We watch people who separate from the workforce and find something else to do that's equal to or greater than what they already made before. Doesn't happen a lot, but I would say 10 to 15% of the time. Sometimes they take 3 months off. Sometimes they take 6 months off. Many times they are decided to build a business, which gives us a lot of opportunities and options. The second one is they separate from the workforce, find something else to do. They're no longer able to save as much as they were saving, but they're able to let what they had continue to grow, or they're able to live off of a defined benefit plan, a pension plan, or some other rental income, some other form of income without having to touch their investments. And then the third is full-on distribution. Here's what you've accumulated. Here's how much income you need. So question number one that we have to know, that you have to know if you're doing this on your own, is how much income do you have to really have to be able to maintain that standard of living? Now, we're going to talk to you about it in terms of phases, but we're also going to talk to you in terms of a retirement budget, right? So when you have to support your standard of living and you're no longer engaged in work, You may have never had a budget before in your life. It's about 50-50 of those of you watching this show or listening have a financial budget at all. It really is about half and half. But when we go to separate from the workforce, we really need to have one. I haven't had a household budget since I had more month than I had money. We've always had a business budget because that's how you run a business. Not all of them, but that's how we run our business, where there is a financial budget that's put into place. We need to have one of those for retirement, though, that says, okay, I need $8,000 a month. Here's what that's what I need to replace my standard of living. That's what somebody says I go through on a monthly basis, or it's 6,000 or it's 12,000. What the number is less meaningful than knowing the number. Then we help people in that retirement budget define it into categories, what we call social expenses and fixed expenses. And that's really going to be critical. So your first assignment for your next steps meeting right now is to make sure that you're able to gather the documents that I would need to be able to make a financial decision for you, so that if you're doing it on your own, you know what documents need to be in front of you to be able to make that decision for yourself. You need to write out risk and volatility, fees and expenses, taxes today and tomorrow, and real return, the fiduciary focus, and say, okay, what am I thinking about in each of these categories based on each financial decision that I'm making? And understand that it's a trade-off. It's not, do I cancel this life insurance policy or keep it? It's the trade-off. What can I do with the money if I get rid of it? What happens if I don't have it? There are 5 or 6 different options that go into play there. If you want to make it easy, just call us at 800-928-4001 or go to yourlifeafterwork.com. Get signed up for a next steps meeting. You did the heavy lifting. Let us do our job. Let us do our turn. We'll take care of you and sit down and give you things you really, really do want to consider. Life brings us many choices and many options. One of those, saving and accumulating for the future, provides options into the future, and that is a great thing. But how much should you be saving? Hey, stay out of the financial penalty box. Define life on your terms, not the IRS, not the Department of Labor. Call us at the Financial Enhancement Group at 800-928-4001 or go to yourlifeafterwork.com. Get signed up for a next steps meeting. Let's get you out of the financial penalty box and let you figure out what the options are for you that make the most sense for your financial journey. Again, that's yourlifeafterwork.com, 800-928-4001. Avoiding bad decisions. That's the key to success. You know, we have to think about our thinking, and what our process is to make a decision cannot be based on reaction as opposed to responding, something that we've already pre-thought out. Hi, I'm Joe Clark. I'm the managing partner of the Financial Enhancement Group, and this really is a conversation over how I look at life. I got a great question from one of the families that we take care of. We're blessed to serve more than 1,100 families in 31 states, more than $600 million that we manage. And the question was pretty clear. Joe, you talk about your risk barometer. Now, sidebar, one, I don't talk about investing on this show, ever, but I do talk about the Market Carver, which is a free video newsletter that you can get sent to your inbox every week. I've been doing it since 2007. Adam Harder, our CFA and our Chief Investment Officer, and Andrew Thrasher, Charter Market Technician, do most of them now. I fill in every now and then. But since 2007, every week, we've missed 1 week, we've had an allocation meeting, and then we give you our best thoughts from the economy and the market from the week before. It comes out in a video we call the Market Carver, again from 2007. So, we've missed 1 week in 15 years. I'd say it's a pretty good track record. If nothing else, we are at least persistent. That's where I talk about that part of really what's going on inside of the economy. The rest of this really is about thinking about my thinking and trying to avoid bad decisions. And I will always tell you that figuring out how to respond to a condition is better than reacting, because that invites the emotions and the guts, if you will. So Adam and myself and Andrew built what's called a risk barometer, and that risk barometer gives us the metrics of what's going on outside, where it tells us it's going to be rainy or foggy or warm or cold or whatever it is. And it's rarely right on a given day, but it tends to be right with the trend of what's going on over a period of time. And it gives our team the ability to sit back and say, okay, if this happens, which is now more probable than this happening because of the risk barometer, here's how we will respond. Here's the conditions that we have. When you look at life from another side, or another condition in the risk barometer, it may go to the other side. And so, somebody who knows me well asked me the question, made a lot of sense. Joe, I know you talk about keeping your emotions at bay to try to reduce bad decisions, but how do you really get that done in this world where the market is just absolutely volatile? And part of it, I mean, in all fairness, it is experience, right? I started in this industry 2 weeks before the crash in 1987. I came from a family with lots of love but no resources, right? So I show up on a Monday morning, the secretary's crying. Literally everybody had already quit. It's 10 or 11 in the morning. They'd quit. Right? And so I had to teach myself this industry from the street side before I went to the CFP world to become a certified financial planner, and now I've done this for 35 years. But I've dealt with more volatility from 87, the tech wreck in 2000, 9/11, 2002, which was a horrible technical year for the market, the Great Recession in '08 and '09, the pandemic in 2020 and beyond, as some people would say. I've dealt with that. So part of it's experience. And you may want to look at your spouse right now because you may have more money in equities today than your kids do. That's the first time in history, by the way. And I can give you a lot of reasons and rationale for it, but we do for the first time in recorded history, the people that are 60 and older have a higher allocation to equities than people who are 40 and under. It's never happened before in recorded history. And again, I can give you some reasons, but I think it is reaction as opposed to a response and to good decisions. I think it's reacting to the world that they grew up in and the environment they grew up in. And you and I that are listening to this, because I'm just like you and I that are listening to this have been through a lot. We've seen a lot through the world of the lens of the 401k. So how do I keep from making bad decisions? And I belong to 3 different organizations. The CFP board I don't count, but Ed Slott is where I go to get my tax information. I deal with multiple CPA firms around the country, many CPAs where somebody will come in and we deal with their firm on their individual stuff, just like we would with you. But we also have our preferred providers that we've had long-standing relationships with, Huth Thompson, more than 20 years now. So we have that side, but Ed Slott's where I go to get my tax training from a tax attorney, CPAs, CFPs that focus on nothing but tax stuff. Strategic Coach is a program that I go to that helps me as an individual entrepreneur understand how to relate and deal with the rest of the world. And then Genius Marketing is where there's a lot of people that help to craft messages and be able to get that information out. So the guy who distributes the podcast for me is across in the YouTube channels is part of that program. So I take in that information. So I don't want you to think that these are necessarily just Joe ideas that have come in. I do a lot of reading and a lot of thinking about my thinking in order to get here. But if you're going to do this on your own, I think you need to deal with a framework so that when something occurs, you have a way to drop it into a filter so that the decision pops out with the least amount of emotional response that you can have, right? And so at the top of my journal, every time I have to make a decision, and you've heard me say it on this show before, right? I can do just about anything I want to do. We're 25 years old as a firm. I'm the managing partner. We've been very, very blessed. We've got a great team. We can do just about anything we want to do from a business perspective. I chose to build a trust division last year. The team did. We choose to manage money internally. We choose to provide financial planning as part of the package so people don't pay extra for that. We choose to work with estate planning attorneys. Those are business decisions we made. But there's decisions we also didn't get to make because we made those. That's that trade-off. So I can do just about anything I want to do. I just can't do everything I want to do. Well, how does that apply to you? Well, when you've sat down and you've said to your fiduciary, and again, in many cases, that's yourself, right? When you've said to your fiduciary, hey, I want to be growth oriented, I believe in the long-term economic viability of the economy, or when you say, hey, I am now 60 years old, I've decided I'm only going to have 60% equities, hell or high water, and 40% is going to be in fixed income that provides me coupons. You've made that decision, and then conditions change. You either have to say, well, I've already made the decision, I am done. Or you have to recognize that there's new facts, not just opinions, there's new facts. Or you can get caught up in reacting because of news headlines that didn't really change the facts, they just changed the short-term condition. And you've got to be able to differentiate when those are, right? So, I can do just about anything I want to do. I just can't do everything I want to do. So the first thing when we have to make a decision is to begin to identify what is the choice decision and what are the other options we can make, right? I can leave money in cash. I can buy stock A, stock B, or stock C. And what most people tend to do in their minds is, do I buy A or do I buy B? Or do I not buy A or buy A? And it's really, it's a trade-off. There are things we can do with capital. If I put money in my 401k, I can't put it into another investment account because the dollars can't get spent twice. Those are those kind of things. Secondly, I believe that the quality of your life will always be based on the decisions that you make. The best way to make a good decision is to have the right question. So in the same framework, I tend to ask myself, I say, Joe, because you want to make yourself feel good about yourself, right? Pat me on the back. Joe, that's a great question. But is it the right question? Right? Because sometimes we ask ourselves questions that we want to have the answer to, or we think we already have the answer to. So I'm a bias nut. I search for where bias exists in the world. When I started teaching at Purdue back in 2008 rather, I looked at the students at the beginning of class and I said, I know you're not allowed to talk about money, religion, and politics. I get it. But just so you know, I'm a Christian conservative that manages money. And the kid's mouth went, oh, and they went, Professor, you can't say that. Well, I know I can't say that, but it's not fair for me not to say it. I don't care if you're a Christian. I do care, but I'm not going to treat you any different if you're not. I don't care if you're a conservative. I do care, but I'm not going to treat you any different, right? And we are going to talk about money. It's what I do. But you need to understand the lens I look at my bias, right? So, I'm teaching through a lens that I believe, right? And you need to understand that as you listen to this to try to figure out what your questions are. You don't have to believe what I believe, but you do need to understand, just as I have those biases, you have your own biases about what you believe. One of those biases is the proximity bias, where you tend to believe what you're around the most, right? So be careful who your friends are, what news stations you watch, if you watch one continuously. The other part of that is we tend to find things that reinforce what we already tend to believe to be true. Right? So you intentionally have to look for the alter argument. That's one of those things why you make a list of other options that you have with money, with what you could do. Right? So the market's going to be up or down today. Who knows? Right? Who knows how it started? Who knows where it's going to be midday? And who knows how it's going to end? The probability is you aren't going to buy or sell today. We do that maybe on 15 or 20 days out of the year. Certainly not on a daily basis, and it's depending on what the economy and market give us at a particular time. When you look at this, though, you want to have a decision-making tool that's put together. You want to make sure that you're researching, what are my choices if I buy more today or if I sell more today? What do I do with that capital? You need to have that thought out simply before you push a button, make a buy order, make a sell order. Understand what you could be doing with the capital in a different direction. The key thing is here to think ahead of time so that you can reduce the impact of reaction. We all have emotions. Lord knows I do. You can try to contain your biases, understand what they are, and most importantly, search out clear, clarified thoughts so you know how to respond before the event actually arrives whenever possible. Just my thoughts for the day. I hope you're enjoying your retirement playbook. If you got questions or comments, go to yourlifeafterwork.com or call us at 800-928-4001. What is your favorite color, M&M? Now just stop and think about it. You probably have a bias toward one versus a handful of them all. right? And that's the way it is. Our mind always will move toward its most dominant thought. Think about it. If you're thinking about a red M&M or a brown M&M or a green M&M, that's where your mind is focused. You probably are ready for M&Ms right now. It's what happens to financial data just as well. We go and search out what we already believe to be true. We search out what we want to hear more of. What we're trying to do on this program and what we're trying to do at Your Life After Work at the Financial Enhancement Group is give you things to consider today for your retirement playbook. Give us a call at 800-928-4001 or go to yourlifeafterwork.com to get more information. We look forward to sitting down and working with you. 800-928-4001, yourlifeafterwork.com. The new retirement savings time bomb from Ed Slott, Part 2. That's right, I'm back. I promised I would give you more, and I know we're not going to get it done in one segment, but we're going to talk about things that retirement savers can diffuse this time tax bomb, what Ed Slott says you should do, and my thoughts on the subject as well. So Ed and I would both say that this is true. Ed's broken it down to 5 easy steps. I'm a checklist junkie, in case you haven't recognized that from listening to the show over the period of time. One of my at least top 7 favorite books is the Checklist Manifesto. Strongly encourage you to read it. If you do not use checklist, you probably will by the time you're done reading the book. So what are the 5 easy things that you can do? And I'll argue with that over easy, but it sure sounds good, doesn't it? Easy things that you can do to diffuse the tax time bomb. The first one is by timing it smartly. Now let's go back for a second. What in the world is the tax bomb? The tax bomb is that inability for you to control the future. The decision that the IRS is going to make, Congress is going to make regarding what's going to be taxed in the future, how it's going to be treated. I like the analogy of the kid with the ice cream cone who agrees not to have ice cream at the beginning of the day if he can get 2 scoops at the end of the day. The problem is nobody explained to him that the size of the scoops would change. They could be bigger. They could be smaller. Nobody talked to him about the flavor, meaning what it's going to go with at the time. Your tax return, by the way, is an orchestra. It's a symphony all working together. And when you have income, regardless of what the source is, this is where some people get into Roth IRA complications. People look at the tax return as individual lines. What did I get from Social Security? What did I get from dividends? What did I get from interest? They all go on the form. But the reality is they all work together to figure out what tax rate you're going to be in. And just like the little kid with the ice cream cones, the scoops can be much, much smaller if the tax rate changes. We call it a retirement savings time bomb. When you get your 401k statement and it says you have $1 million inside of the 401k, but it's all tax deferred, right now, it's going to cost you $250,000 to get it out. But in the future, it may be $400,000. The top tax rate, by the way, that most of you've lived with was when Kennedy took office. It was 90%. When Reagan took office, it was 70%. And back in 1986 is when they got it down to 15, 28, and 31. So that's the time savings tax bomb, if you will. It's coming in the future. So what are the 5 easy steps? The first one is timing it smartly. By choosing the right time to start taking your money out of your retirement accounts and the right amount to take, you can escape racking up the huge tax bills plus penalties that stem from withdrawing too little, too early, or too late. So most people I have found that do this on their own, when you're acting as your own fiduciary, do not pay attention to their tax return. I have a lady in Lafayette, Indiana that I love dearly. I truly do. I mean, these people are like my grandparents in many cases, and it's just a wonderful opportunity to be able to serve people. But when you've taken care of somebody for 25 years, there's an emotional attachment. So the first 5 years that I worked with her, she did her own taxes, and she would bring in the taxes at the end of the year, not to do tax planning, but just to show me what the return was. And each year I would look at her and try to explain what I'm about to tell you. She had $2 million inside of a 403B account. Her and her husband were both professors at the university. He'd passed away before I got to meet him. $2 million inside of a 403B. The house was paid for. The cars were paid for. She had enough other cash. And so she was taking very, very little out of in any place, in all fairness, but a little bit of money out of her checking account that had already been taxed. No money out of her 403B because she hadn't been forced to yet. because she hadn't hit required minimum distribution, and she didn't take Social Security as she shouldn't have based on the other resources that she had. And so for 5 years, I would look at her and go, listen, here's how much money we are losing. Here's how much money we're losing. Well, she finally got to the point where she was 2 years away from required minimum distribution. She was 68. And I said, here's the amount of money that we have given up to the IRS over the last 5 years. And she got white in the face and she goes, what do you mean we gave up? See, the IRS gives you a set of rules. And this is not about cheating in taxes. This is about making the most of the opportunity, if you will. You've saved and accumulated this money, and you've looked at your tax rate. You don't need the income, and so people are reticent to take money out of the account if they're not going to actually use it or spend it. I get that. I understand that. The problem is, just because you take it out doesn't mean you need to spend it. But somebody, either you or your heirs, are going to pay taxes on that money. And maybe if you leave it to a charity, that's not the case, but we don't know what the future tax code holds, so maybe you still have to pay it. Who knows? It's still part of your gross estate, even if you give it away at death. But the point being is she could have taken out money at a 0% federal tax rate, a 0%. Right? And then there was some money that she could have taken out at 10%, the lowest tax bracket we've ever had. Right? But she didn't, because she wasn't thinking about tax planning. She was thinking about how cool it was to not have to pay any taxes along the way, how cool it was to get that 403B statement and watch your accounts continue to soar in value. But the whole problem is, as it continued to grow, that time bomb that Ed Slott talks about was continuing to exacerbate. It was continuing to become a worse condition. And at 68, when I told her at age 70, at that point in time, when I told her at age 70 she was going to have to begin to take required minimum distributions that were over six figures, it was, it was about $80,000, I think, $85,000 if I remember correctly, that she was going to have to take, and Social Security was going to have to start that year because you can't wait past 70 in order to get it. All of a sudden, she was going to be not in that zero tax bracket that she was in, but she was going to be up 2 or 3 steps on the bracket for no reason at all other than not actively engaging in the tax planning. So there's a decision to make, do I spend or do I save? But there's also another decision that the IRS lets you make about when you want to be taxed. Once you've reached those penalty-free ages of 59 and a half if you're in an IRA or a 403B or 401k, sometimes 55 if you're in a 401k, you can make the choice about when you want to recognize income, when you want to spend the money. I would strongly encourage you to consider that as part of your tax planning strategy. Second is secure it. All right, now, Ed says, don't be fooled by the name Congress gave to the recent raid of your retirement savings. They call the law the Secure Act, but it does the exact opposite when it comes to retirement funds you leave to your children and grandchildren. With the elimination of the stretch IRA, you need new planning alternatives to avoid the tax hit your beneficiaries may take. That's right, the tax rules have changed in terms of how people have to take that money out when they receive it. Now, here's a hilarious thing. When it comes to the tax code, there's 2 names that I always pay attention to. Natalie Choate is the one that I listen to and go to when I'm in the CE professional setting, if you will. Ed Slott's the one that talks to the consumers, that helps me to put it into English and brings in English-speaking people, and I don't mean of our nationality. I mean, puts it in terms that my poor little head can understand and yours can understand. And when we sit here and look at this and try to figure out what it means for the future, Secure Act sounds really safe and good on the outside, but it is certainly anything but that, and changes some of the rules in terms of distribution of your 401k and your IRA, not to your spouse, but certainly to your kids and to siblings and other people of that nature. The interesting part is some of this stuff in Secure Act 2.0 we really don't have the answer for. And in one of the media outlets, and Ed Slott's in many of them, and again, you can find him at irahelp.com, him and as well as the rest of my group. We're all on his website one way or the other to be able to find advisors that are trained in his type of thought process. But when you go through the article, and one of the articles, I can't remember if it was Wall Street Journal or Forbes, but I think it was one of the two, that essentially said, it got down to asking Ed an answer, and Ed said, we just don't know. And the quotation that came from the author is, if Ed Slott doesn't know, nobody knows. And that's really where we are with the tax code today. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in Secure Act 2.0 that we don't know, which is why, in my opinion, you have to build flexibility into your financial planning to be able to deal with the IRS, not just today, but 10 years from today. When you're pulling the money out, when you need it for distribution for your life after work, when you need it to be able to give to your heirs or your charitable entities, you need a strategy that's 10 years out that provides some flexibility for changes that will occur in the U.S. tax code. There's no way around it. I won't tell you that taxes will double or triple or go down by half. All I know is they will change. That I will bet my net worth on. They will change from where they are today. And so you've got to be ready to not be flat-footed, but if you will, to be on the balls of your feet like a basketball player to figure out the best way to use your money. So you want to understand that impact to the stretch. I have argued long time that it makes most sense for American families to have conversations with their kids about their resources. I totally disagree with Wells Fargo commercial from the Wells Fargo golf event. It just blew my mind. They ran the commercial 20 times. This attractive lady, financial advisor, said, "We believe you need to talk to your kids about your life savings so that they have a safety net." I don't think you want your kids to think that they have a safety net in terms of your income or your assets. I thought it was the craziest commercial I've ever seen in my entire life. I do believe you need to communicate with your kids, though, because of the tax nature of what it is you've deferred and saved. Not so they can sit back and count money waiting for the days for me to pass. Not so they can sit back and say, I don't have to work hard because mom and dad already did the work for me. I don't think that's the case at all. But understanding the tax implications are very, very, very important. Now, we got 2 of the 5 done. That means we have 3 steps left that we're going to talk about in another show. Make sure if you're listening to this, remember you can always go to a podcast channel. Anywhere you listen to podcast, put in Your Retirement Playbook. You'll be able to find more shows like this. Consider this program was years and years and years. Eventually, the names will be rechanged to Your Retirement Playbook, but you can find stuff there. Consider this program or Your Retirement Playbook. And don't forget YouTube. If you like watching this on video, every now and then we have a blackboard. I used to call it a whiteboard, so if I slip, I slip. But it's a blackboard that I'm able to draw on behind. Obviously, if you're listening on the radio or even listening on the podcast, you won't be able to see it. But you will be able to if you're watching it on YouTube. It's a freebie. If you need any questions about how to get a hold of us, just call the office, 800-928-4001, or go to yourlifeafterwork.com. Our technology guy, Ron, will be more than happy to get you set up to be able to watch the show. Have a great week. For more information on this show and other educational content, go to yourlifeafterwork.com. Get signed up for the Market Carver, the weekly newspaper column, more information that comes out via video. Don't forget at the Facebook page, you can go to Financial Enhancement Group /financial tidbits. Get more videos and up-to-date information about what we're going to cover on the show. Most importantly, get signed up for a Next Steps meeting. It is complimentary. We'll spend 90 minutes with you to give you things you want to consider today, things you're going to want to consider in the future. And if we choose to partner together, what FEG will do for you, and we'll put it into writing. Go to 800-928-4001, yourlifeafterwork.com. What is your financial dopamine? And dopamine's an interesting thing. Apparently, according to a book I'm reading called Healthy Habits of a Brain, or Retraining Your Brain, something like that. But there's 4 chemicals that are produced inside of our brain that provide different emotional context, different things we should consider. One of those is dopamine, and really the question and what we're going to focus on this show is, what is your financial dopamine? What gives you confidence? So my name's Joe Clark. I'm the managing partner of the Financial Enhancement Group, and I'm a certified financial planner, an adjunct assistant professor at Purdue University, years from 2008 to 2015, where I taught financial planning. You know, I think about this stuff a lot, and I've dealt with more than 2,000 families, literally, in the last 35 years when it comes to financial planning. And I always try to figure out what gives people the most amount of confidence in being able to make decisions. And see, I think we all live in a reality. I mean, my reality is my reality, but my perception distorts that reality. So you know people that are glass half full or optimist and glass half empty or pessimist. You know that they may have the same reality, but the way that they look at life is a little bit different, right? So here we are. We're in this world today, and what my job is to try to do from a business perspective and from helping you on your financial journey is really helping you maintain the confidence that you need to have to fulfill the mission at hand. So when you sit down with somebody on our advisory team and they ask you what your financial vision is, it's, okay, Joe, we're here and this is where I want to go. And that financial vision can vary for a lot of different reasons. Two of my extremes, right? I've got a missionary that said, Joe, at 65, I want to give away more money on to other people and things than I spend on myself. Okay, noble endeavor. One of my other ladies says at 92, I don't want to be a bag lady. Right now, those are 180-degree differentials. And so how we treat the money, how we help her and him make investment decisions should be entirely different. And it really is the problem with reading an article or listening to a radio show that doesn't acknowledge that we really have those varying of opinions and those differences. So one of the things that you need to write down, not just your financial vision that says you're here today, where is it that you really want to go into the future? You really need to acknowledge what your dope is, right? What makes you happy and excited? Now, in my experience, something that is very, very concrete that I've seen very few people depressed over is the size of their statement increasing. Right? That is Wall Street's dopamine, by the way. That's how they get paid, is being able to produce volatile numbers for you. Now, that may be surprising, but understand this. Wall Street never has made money off commissions. They do not get paid for you to buy and sell stocks based on a commission or a brokerage ticket. What they do is get paid on a tiny little thing called the space between the bid price and the ask price. That little space is what they get paid on. So we can go back in time. In 1995, there were about 7,500 publicly traded companies. And on an average day, we traded between 2 and 400 million shares of stock a day. Much closer to 2, by the way, than 400 million. So today's 2022. So you're, just a mere, 20 some years away from where you were, 28, almost 30 years when you get down to the nitty gritty. What's changed? And the answer is today we trade between 4 and 6 billion shares of stock on a daily basis. 26 years later, 4 to 6 billion shares of stock. That would lead somebody to conclude who didn't know we must have a lot more stocks to sell. And the reality is no, we actually have less. It's about 7,300 publicly traded companies today than what we had versus the 7,500 back then. So what changed? Well, Wall Street, and I disagree with the decision, though I understand the logic, decided that you needed to get your statements much more frequently. That if you're going to have defined contribution plans, you needed to have access to what that value was. And we really had, it wasn't even CNBC really at the time. It was a financial station. Mark Haynes was on it back then. I used to love being on CNBC with Mark. He passed away a few years back. But you had financial networks, but you really didn't have access to the markets on a minute-by-minute basis. And so in 1995, the legislation went through that essentially said we had to start providing you statements on a more regular basis. You used to get one 401k statement a year. Now some people look at it daily. You certainly get a statement quarterly, and in many cases it's monthly. So we get more information. Now, that access to information has led to quote-unquote confidence of decision, though. It's confidence in figuring out whether you want to buy or sell. And remember, there's fear and greed that tend to drive a market. Fear will always dominate. So volume tends to pick up when markets have corrections much more than it does when markets have when markets are going up, or what we would call in a bull market. The people will respond more to fear than opportunity by a magnitude of 3 to 4 times in most examples that behavioral finance people will give you. It's just fear elicits that, oh my goodness, I've got to do something. So it takes away your confidence in the future and puts more of your focus on the immediate short term, which at the end of the day makes Wall Street wealthier because you tend to do things, either sell out of fear or buy out of greed, that promotes more activity. So their dopamine on Wall Street comes from giving you information that has had a dramatic change month over month. The quicker they can get you the data, typically the more volume that's out there, the happier they become. So your job is to be able to figure out what that confidence level really is. Now, I know, and you know, when my 401k statements arrive, an average FEG family. When my statements arrive and I'm able to look at our value on a month-to-month basis, and I open it up with one eye, right? And I have a special chair that I sit in and open it up like I'm just like you, one of our families that we take care of. And I open up my mail, open up the emails, I look at the numbers, right? And the higher it is, the better I feel. I'd be a lie if I said it would. I mean, for goodness sakes, come on. Of course I feel better. But I also have all of the confidence of the other stuff that goes along with it. I understand that at some point in time, Barb and I, we've been married for 34 years. At some point in time, we're going to start to spend more time away from work and less time in work. Now, that's not going to happen for a long time, and it's not my intention of ever doing. I intend to have more vacations, and we really already do that now. You've got to figure out how your life looks. But at some point in time, I'm not going to be able to put in as much as I'm putting in now. At some time, I will probably have to even be pulling out what I've put in. And I tell you what, I've done this long enough professionally to know the emotional challenge that feels like. I kid people and tell them when their statement arrives, the kids have left home, the statement arrives, it's finally a number that matters, right? And they look at the number and they would invite the statement to Thanksgiving if they possibly could, because it is so meaningful. The last thing they want to think about is taking money out and hurting their newfound child by reducing what that growth is. And that may sound really, really crazy to some of you. Others of you are going, yeah, Joe, I'm one of those people. Most of you are. It is hard to get people to pull money out of that account because we feel more confident the bigger the account is and it grows. What I want to help you do is to provide you a due form of dopamine, a security, an understanding, if you will, of here is a process that responds as opposed to reacts, so that you can look at where you are today and understand what's going to happen in the future. If you ever sit down with somebody at the Financial Enhancement Group, they will show you a statement that we use inside of our office when we make decisions. And number one, the statement, I call it the 4-pager. The statement is going to promise you that we take care of things in an independent, nobody pays us anything except for you. Transparent, you get to see everything that we do. Midwestern values you really understand already, being in the Midwest likely. And then the fourth is the fiduciary standard, where we have to treat your money as if it were ours and we were in the same situation. The next page is going to show you the financial journey that a family's been on since 2008. Notice I didn't say 2022 or even 2020. All the way back to 2008, we're able to watch what their financial journey was like. Now, you weren't here for those 14 years. You may have not been in the same investment models. A lot of different things mattered. The return is really immaterial. What matters is understanding that they were on a financial journey, and so were you. And when we get caught in these short-term periods of time, that's what provides Wall Street their dope. That's what gives them their dopamine. What we want to make sure that we do is give you your dopamine, your confidence, and that confidence really is in process and being able to look at the journey. It's interesting. We get calls from people about the market today that either aren't families we take care of or people that haven't been here very long. I don't get many calls at all from people that lived through the tech wreck with us or the 9/11 with us or 2008 and 2009 with us. They know we understand. They know we've been here. They don't like the market going down. I don't like the market going down, but they also understand that they're on a financial journey, and we've been able to use our processes to navigate that volatility, and that's where their confidence comes from, is understanding that process. So when you sit down with somebody on the team, what we're going to try to do is to provide safety nets, if you will, by stress testing things, by being able to provide you strategies to be able to say, okay, we've got this condition of a crazy market today. What can we do that is in the best interest for ourselves from a tax planning standpoint over the next 5 to 10 years? What can we do today that's going to influence the tax part, which is very much part of our financial journey? I think that gets overlooked every day. People will focus on, again, it's one of those biases, they will focus on where they are right now and what matters most. And what I really want you to do is not focus on just one thing. Remember James Clear, success is never dependent upon one thing, but failure can be. Don't get caught with all of your feet in one spot thinking about one thing, risk and volatility. Look at the 4 things of the fiduciary focus: risk and volatility, fees and expenses, taxes day tomorrow, and real return. There's huge opportunities you can take and make right now in the tax planning arena just by understanding what's going on. Figure out where your confidence comes from, or let us help you do that. Go to 800-928-4001, yourlifeafterwork.com. Let's have a conversation and talk about your next steps. I hate surprises. I know. Sometimes they're good, but I'm 55 years old and I really don't like surprises. I want my calendar to say where I'm supposed to be. I want to be there when I'm supposed to be, and I want to leave when I'm supposed to leave. I like things in order. Now, we all know life is chaotic. It just is. Crazy things happen. What we've created at the Financial Enhancement Group is a next steps process that's built around a trademarked program to help you eliminate the chaos and get more of what you expect. We want to eliminate surprises. So the next steps process is based on this. You show up, you bring the financial materials that we need, and my team, trained, proficiency exam, the whole bit, will sit down with you and give you things you're going to want to consider today in 5 areas: your life after work, the annual tax planning, the investment playbook, life happens, things that are going on inside of your life, good, bad, and ugly, and your legacy plan. We'll give you things to consider today, things you're going to want to consider in the future, and if we choose to partner together, what FEG will do for you, and we'll put it into writing. Go to yourlifeafterwork.com. Get signed up for a next steps meeting. Get rid of the surprises. Get rid of the chaos. Give us a call at 800-928-4001 or go to yourlifeafterwork.com. Spend 90 minutes with us and you'll be happy.